All right, we're live. Welcome to Let's Talk Markets Live, a special Monday, June 9th edition. Uh, really excited to be joined by Mihir Dange from XCF Global. Mihir, it's a big day. Congratulations.
It is. It is a big day. We are very thankful to be here.
We had you on in December, and we talked about your journey to become a public company. It's been a long, winding road, I guess you could say, but today is the day. Is that it? You are public now.
Today is the day. We are publicly traded under the ticker SAFX, really trying to embody being pioneers in the sustainable aviation fuel space, green fuel for the decarbonization for aviation. It's a big deal. It's an investable product. We're trying to create a platform that just currently doesn't exist today.
That's really cool. And so you are the first publicly traded pure play sustainable aviation fuel producer in the United States. You went public through a SPAC.
That is correct.
We had talked about a lot last time. But you know, I don't think it's let's say common to have the opportunity to talk to someone on the day their company goes public. So, you know, what's it like? What's the day been like, and how are you feeling right now?
It is. It's surreal. It's a surreal feeling, and I think it's because it's been a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work to build a business. It's a lot of hard work to organize all the stakeholders and get this to where it has been meant to be all along. And it's taken a lot of twists and turns, but we are incredibly thankful to be here, and it is insanely rewarding. It feels like if you're ever qualifying for the Olympics, right? When you qualify for the Olympics, let's just use track and field for example. You have to run your heat, and then you have to run another heat, and then you get to the semifinals, and then you get to the finals, and you have to place in top two of the finals. And when you do, you're going to the Olympics, right? But that's when the real work starts,
Right?
Right? Because you need to go to the Olympics and you need to place. So it feels like we're at that juncture where we've put in a lot of time and energy and all the years of investment banking experience and trading experience and putting a team together. It is, but it is very rewarding. It's very rewarding to sit here today, to sit with a team that worked day and night to get this done.
And what's the day been like? You know, what is it like when you wake up in the morning and you're going public that day? What have you had to do? What are the different things that you've had to deal with? And is it all just about, okay, all of the work was to get us to this day, and now today's easy?
I started my day like a normal day. I did my workouts in the morning, prep breakfast for the kids. And I did a couple of interviews, but when the bell rang, that was a different feeling. The first time to see the ticker, to see it trading, that was a really rewarding experience. And we did it with the entire team on the line, so we could all kind of witness it together, even though we were in all different locations. So that experience is it's also humbling.
So let's talk about XCF as a business. We spent quite a bit of time on this last time, but we could have new people watching this. So when you announced XCF listing, you said the completion of this transaction marks a transformational step for XCF Global and the decarbonization of the aviation industry. Commercial production underway, first deliveries completed, and a proven business model in place. We're entering the public markets with momentum and a clear path to growth. So I think that's like a good statement to sit on to reintroduce XCF and its mission to Irvin's audience. So why don't we just take a step back and tell us again what XCF does, and how it helps decarbonize the aviation industry?
Great question. And I think in order to address like what XCF is, I think we should just look at what the overall market is. So the overall market right now is focused on sustainable aviation fuel. And it's because we have already made efforts to decarbonize different industries till now, solar, electric vehicles, and there are many others. The decarbonization of the aviation industry, however, has taken a backseat for some period of time. It started with the electrification of fleets, and soon they realized that that's not really going to put a dent into what the issue is at hand. And the issue is that if over the next 10 years, if we do not decarbonize the fuel and the fuel supply from the aviation industry, we will be looking at currently 3% of the world's carbon emissions come from airlines. That will balloon to 20%. And year-on-year growth for airline consumption and flights is only continuing to grow. And so what has happened is different countries have implemented different types of mandates, voluntary mandates and involuntary, which are forced mandates, which have penalty-driven mechanisms to force airlines to have the molecular sustainable aviation fuel into the wing of the plane. Because currently that is the only way to really decarbonize this industry. We are far ways away from having an electric plane for mid and long range just because batteries are too heavy. So that being said, the market needs sustainable aviation fuel. It needs people to actually convert. What we do is we convert a fat, oil, or grease, and we convert it into this jet fuel. And then that jet fuel gets partially blended with petroleum-based Jet A and gets put into the wing of the plane. Currently, there's enough supply to manage what the world needs today on a mandate-driven basis. Those are involuntary, and voluntary. And for example, in Europe, currently a 2% mandate requires that each airline puts 2% into the wing of a plane over their entire year. And if they don't, they're penalized, depending on the jurisdiction, up to $19 a gallon, which can be very hefty fine. So that's what's happening in the backdrop. The industry needs sustainable aviation fuel year on year, and that growth is only going to continue because these mandates are only going to continue. So what is XCF? XCF is a pure play sustainable aviation fuel company that currently has an operational asset in Reno, Nevada today. On a run rate basis at full production, we have the ability to produce about 40 million gallons per annum. That's really exciting because there are so few companies that actually are producing sustainable aviation fuel. And the anticipation is that there will be, there are somewhere between 40 and 50 projects that are live today across the world. The anticipation is that that will balloon to about 4,000 to 5,000 over the next 25 years to meet the needs of sustainable aviation fuel. So where we differ is that we're trying to create a platform that is investable from supply chain to bringing on additional volumetric production of SAF over the next decade. We're currently we're on the smaller side. We have one operational facility with 3 other behind it that will come on over the next 3 to 4 years. But we're really trying to target the sweet spot for investors, which is there isn't a product like this to invest in.
And when you talk about adding the SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel, alongside the petroleum fuel, what's the highest mix of sustainable fuel that planes can use?
Right now, what we're seeing is the minimum blend is typically 90-10. So that's 90% Jet A to 10% SAF. It's actually called synthetic aviation fuel. Some people still
Okay.
call it sustainable. So the max is 50-50 right now. So 50% Jet A with 50% SAF. And we think that that will stay for some period of time.
Okay. And so you said you have one commercial facility up and running now. And how many do you plan to have?
So over the next, in our current immediate pipeline with the projects that we have today, we are anticipating to have 4 total sites by the end of 2028.
Okay. What's it like what's going on at one of these sites? What's it like to visit? Do you have any interesting stories to tell?
It looks like just another piece of infrastructure. I think when you can't actually see the oil coming in and the hydrogen coming in and watching kind of the particles being broken down to convert this into sustainable aviation fuel. I have this bottle of the first production batch of SAF. It looks like vodka or water, So it's really hard to when you look at this thing to see how it's actually being developed. But it's working. The thing is when you go to the facility, there are people who are constantly maintaining and monitoring the systems to make sure that they're running at 100%. And even though you don't see a lot, I think it's a testament to the engineering, because it's working as well as it should be, which means that there are never really any issues.
That sounds really nice. It sounds like it's easy to sleep at night when when you don't have any real issues.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like a typical project. You have to come in, you got to sign in, you got to wear your hard hats, you got to wear your PPE. It's very important. It's still it's still a production facility at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And when did you make your first deliveries?
We made our first deliveries in March of 2025. So just a couple of months earlier this year is when we started making our first deliveries domestically.
And so that is the domestic U.S. market your primary market?
I think currently domestic is where we'll see a lot of this product end up. But just because we're a newer producer and a younger producer, I think we're going to start figuring out what are the best netbacks back in the industry. And it may require that maybe there are better netbacks by sending it internationally. We're still exploring a lot of those options.
Mm-hmm. What do you think drives that? Is it political climate? Is it cost pressures? What all of the above, maybe?
It's a little bit of everything, and it's hard to like put your finger on one particular thing. And I think it's because each country has its own political climate and dynamic on how they evaluate SAF. So like, for example, what that means is domestically, we are in a voluntary base mandate, which means that the United States government has put together the SAF Grand Challenge. That SAF Grand Challenge is the goal to meet 3 billion gallons of SAF production here domestically by 2030. Most estimates I've read are we're going to have a huge shortfall from it. But that being said, it's voluntarily driven, and it was created in the Biden administration. So we have new administration, we have new theory, and a lot of that is a little bit pushing towards petroleum-based products, which is potentially means that there is more eyes on petroleum-based products than green type of products. Now that's just domestically. However, in this environment, this country, the United States, is the most generous at giving producer-based credits. There are state credits that are involved. There are incentives at the federal level, and there are IRA credits.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a voluntary-based system, but we have a tremendous amount of credits that don't exist in other parts of the world. Now, if we look at Europe, for example, Europe doesn't have any, I don't want to say any credits. There are some credits that are out there, and those credits are helped to stimulate the purchasing of SAF, but the mandates are really driving volumes. So a 2% mandate today is a 6% mandate in 2030, is a 20% mandate in 2035, which means that 2% of the molecule has to go into the wing of the plane, will balloon to 20% in 10 years, and then 70% in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the credit stack is very different, and it looks very different. We're seeing Japan is eyeing a 10% target, but I don't see any federal incentives for it just yet. And then we're seeing other countries like Norway, Malaysia, India with smaller targets like 1% and 2%. And again, they don't really have country specific incentives just yet. So you have that piece, right? You have the piece of the interdynamics between countries. You have shipping and logistics costs. You also have how do tariffs play into a lot of these things. Like currently, there is no biofuel tariff on or moving product to the EU, but you might find that there will be for Asia. Mm-hmm. So it's a hard nut to crack because there are so many different moving pieces, but it's also the opportunity, in my opinion. It's the opportunity to build a platform.
And so you're actually, like it or not, kind of wrapped up in this reconciliation bill that's winding its way through Congress, where one of the core sort of, one of the pieces of it that is controversial and where the House and Senate disagree is the sunsetting of the IRA clean energy credits. How do you, I mean, does that, with the bill as it's currently written, directly affect you guys? And do you hope that the Senate rewrites that part to slow it down?
So I think with the IRA and some of the sunsetting abilities or clauses that they were looking to do, it would have affected biofuels. Mm-hmm. What we've noticed is, in particular, 45Z, which directly impacts SAF producers, has made a tremendous amount of progress, where there's been a preliminary approval around the extension of 45Z for domestic producers who use domestic feedstocks.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, and that's a great win for the handful of domestic producers that currently exist today. You have to use a domestic feedstock in order to qualify for it. But we do think that that is a great opportunity for a company like ours, which does use a domestic feedstock, is a domestic producer, and is moving that product domestically. So we anticipate that will run until 2031, and that is actually one of the bills that has made the most headway out of the IRA.
That's great. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if the goal of some of this legislation is to onshore production or support domestic industry, it's good to hear that, in your space, that's actually something where there will be consistency. And, from a just running a business perspective, it's hard where you're in the center of something that is, from a political perspective, somewhat controversial, with some volatility. And it sounds like that, at least for you guys, that volatility isn't really taking shape.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, if we think about what is the purpose of this administration, it seems like we're really focusing on how do we bring industry back to the United States or keep it within the United States, right? Obviously, the slogan on his hat says everything, right? Make America great again. So I think in that thesis, this is a way where farmers in the Midwest get to participate into more farm or crop production, and the domestic producers who use that crop production get to benefit from it with a federal credit, which is an accrual. It's a win across the board.
Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, does the synthetic aviation fuel, is it different from an emissions perspective, like from the plane itself, or is it more just about the supply chain and production?
Yeah, so the net of it is that it reduces the carbon intensity. Once it's produced, it reduces the carbon intensity into the wing of the plane by almost 80%. So
Wow.
yeah, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the CI savings, because you're not drilling for a petroleum-based product. You're taking it could be any type of feedstock, right? There is ethanol, we take a fat, oil, or grease,
Mm-hmm.
right, which already has relatively low carbon intensity emissions compared to a petroleum-based product. So you're already starting at a low basis, and the key is to try and keep the supply chain around it as tight as possible. And then there are some feedstocks that have higher carbon intensity measures than others. And if you can keep your carbon intensity measure lower, you get to qualify for potentially more credits.
Okay. All right. Super interesting. And so what is your, I mean, I guess, what is your business model? Is it just sort of you're making money per gallon or per liter, whatever it is? And, has that business model changed over time?
So currently that is the business model in its most rudimentary source, which is how do we take in a feedstock, right? We take in a feedstock, a fat, oil, or grease. We bring that over into our facility. We convert it into SAF, synthetic aviation fuel, and then we deliver it, right? And how do we optimize the core economics around feedstock and delivery, and reducing our production costs and reducing our SG&A and all those different elements? That's the chorus part of the business. We are looking at other opportunities on how to bring more production on. Obviously, volumetric production is taking this same model and replicating it. But there are ways, we think, to reduce costs by investing into feedstock suppliers. And there are potentially ways to have more margin through technological innovation. So we're exploring all of those opportunities as they come about. But we think that this is what I like to call like hitting your tee shot down the middle. This is just a great starting point.
You got to get the approach right.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, you're going to get a good short game. All right. So let's talk about the IPO. How did your journey towards IPO differ from the traditional IPO process, and what lessons do you think there are to be learned, if any, from this journey to public markets?
I think the SPAC IPO is it's a different type of animal, if I may say, in the sense that the way that you go about getting there is very different. I think the best way to look at this is the end result is the same. The end result is that you have a company that is trading in the public markets called the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. So the end result is the same, but the way that you get there is very different. In a typical IPO, what will happen is a company will basically do an offering, potentially season for some period of time with whatever revenue base that they have, and they will take that company public through an underwriter. They will sell a piece of the equity of their overall equity, which then raises capital for them at close and initiates, call it a listing price. That is how typical IPOs will work, which is a little bit more of a build-up. buildup in the business, buildup of getting to IPO day and ringing the bell on the day of your listing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot more, call it a little bit more of a deliberate path. The SPAC is actually different. The vehicle, so what will happen is the vehicle itself will come public first. So that vehicle will have a trust associated with it and investors that invest into that vehicle, and the vehicle goes public first. And it's called like a blank check vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Now that vehicle, the purpose of that vehicle is to find a target that they think meets, call it their needs, their goals, whatever their mandates may be, in order to reverse merge into it. And the reason it's typically a reverse merger is because the bigger entity, so for example, XCF is bigger than the shell entity, but it reverses into that vehicle. So the vehicle is already public and has been public, and it has basically a trust, which allows it to be an investment vehicle, and it has an expiration date. So if they don't meet the timeline, then they don't get public. So when we went through this process, we had a banker who initiated conversations with about 15 different parties, all whom expressed interest in what we were doing. All those are different vehicles that are already listed on the public market, either on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. Mm-hmm. So when we settled with Focus Impact BH3, we felt like we had the best fit for what their mandate was, which was a double bottom line approach in helping the environment or helping people while trying to make money. Mm-hmm. So when we settled on our agreement with them, we initiated a business combination agreement, and the duty is to try and fulfill the business combination agreement. We then file an S4 with the SEC, and we go through what are called multiple rounds of comments until we have sufficiently met their needs for our offering statements. And then once that's complete, then you go through the regulatory body of the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. We're NASDAQ listed, and go through whatever their requirements are. And once those requirements are met, then you have the ability to reverse merge into that shell. So we reverse merged on Friday into that shell. Successfully, we completed all the documents that were necessary for the SEC, for the NASDAQ, and then for our business combination agreement. And then you trade immediately on Monday. So it's a little bit different because you have less of a script on when you can complete all those elements, but it is still a vehicle which allows you to have some investment dollars and come public, and still end up at the same place as some of these other IPOs.
It sounds like a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of hurdles, a lot of opportunities for something to go wrong. What was the most difficult step, do you think? Not to throw anyone under the bus, I'm sure that every organization was lovely to deal with, but what was the hardest part of that?
It is a little bit more nuanced in the fact that you do have to work through all of the different entities and all the different intricacies. I think it's really, I think the hardest part is just being resilient with it. Mm-hmm. I think that's really the hardest part. I think where a lot of things or people fail are, I think people lose the bandwidth, like in frustration, that things are, the SEC process takes a long time. Well, the SEC is doing their job. The NASDAQ process takes their time. Well, the NASDAQ is doing their job. The lawyers have to do their work. The auditors have to do their work. And I think really it's the resilience that's the hardest part, is keeping everybody on task to say, we're here aligned for a common goal. Let's not move, right? And then within that, there's sometimes some pivots and changes that have to be made where it can get off kilter. So I think other than like the timing and the time pressure to complete things in a suitable way, because it takes a while and these SPACs have these vehicles have expiration date. Really, it's can you keep everybody organized and on pace to do things the way that you need to.
Okay, makes sense. So let's just talk about like we've talked about a lot about sort of the past and the present. So what about the future? What is this IPO? First, how much did you raise through it, and what does that do for you as an organization, and how does it help you close this enormous gap of biofuel production that you talked to us about the last time, which I think was aiming to get to 3 billion gallons by 2030, but we're closer to 100 million gallons. At least we were when we last spoke.
Yeah. Okay. So let me try and take that like bit by bit. We came public. So typically all SPACs come public at 10. That's the typical price. We raise at $10. I think we raise. We didn't raise, but the valuation is somewhere around 1.75 billion, and enterprise value of like a little under 1.5 billion. I think I'm really passionate about the future. I'm really passionate about building this business because I think our team has spent a lot of time in different parts of the world identifying what is happening with SAF today. We're noticing that the market is looking for a leader that they can look to, a front runner that is investing in projects, is bringing production on. And there are producers out there today who are doing a great job. They are bringing on production on. They are moving that product all over the world. But I think what is potentially missing is this idea of a platform, which means investing upstream and downstream, investing in different parts of the world, and trying to give the investment community a way to participate into infrastructure in particular and sustainable aviation fuel. And I think that's, to me, what the sweet spot that we really want to be in, because that's what's missing in the environment today. And the way that we get there, it's going to be a long road. And I think we're up for that, but we're up for that. We have to optimize our existing business and our business model. As I mentioned, there are different countries with different values and different levers which change the business profile. So we have to optimize that. We have to optimize the plant itself so that is at 100% capacity. So we're getting the maximum utility out of that facility. And then that we're bringing on additional projects, whether it's through M&A activity or JV partnerships or the existing infrastructure, and figuring out how to bring those on one by one. But we really want to try and pioneer this entire SAF space. That's where our passions lie today.
So you talked about, giving investors, the ability to partake in this and to get into an area of the ecosystem that maybe they haven't had the opportunity before. And when you and I first met, you talked a lot about how this has really been primarily a space for institutional investors. And now you're public, and obviously, being public gets you access to the whole world of investors, including retail and individual investors, which is, I know something that you guys are very passionate about as well. And obviously that's where the crossover happens here. That's why we're talking. That's why we've been engaged now for quite some time, and we're excited to work with you to launch a verified shareholder community on Irvin. What does it mean for you to get this opportunity into the hands of individual investors? And what is your sort of plan for engaging with them now that you are a public company?
I think the retail community is, I think people forget how valuable the retail community is.
Yeah.
It's often looked upon the mom and pops, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of companies don't spend a lot of time with their retail community in order to kind of bring to them what value is in the market. And I think we're trying to take a little bit of a different approach where we want to embrace our retail community. We want to show them the value in what we're doing. We had a lot of wealthy retail investors invest in our project. And we're grateful and thankful for that, because that's what has allowed us to prosper and get to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the institutional community right now is, like I mentioned, is waiting and watching and trying to figure out who they want to invest in and how they want to invest in it. And we've seen the likes of Tesla, GameStop, and other companies that can really profit from a good retail base.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I really want to say is we respect the retail community. I did trading for a long period of time. I understand the value in what retail can bring. And in particular here, I feel like this is an opportunity that typically institutions get to look at all these opportunities first, and retail looks at them later. I feel like this is this is a time where everybody's focused on petroleum-based products. So let's offer this to the retail community first and see if they can get in before some of the institutions.
Yeah, I think that the way that our markets have developed is that the only companies that go public are enormous, and most of the wealth creation has already taken place. And often retail is just seen sort of as an exit strategy, rather than getting them in early enough that they can really partake in the growth of a smaller organization. So, it's exciting to see you guys out there going public earlier than I think many companies, and having that opportunity and doing, not too shabby. I'm sure you don't want to comment on stock price or performance, but so far it feels like it's been a pretty good day, pretty volatile day as well. Any thoughts on that volatility? I don't know if you can comment on it at all.
I think it's going to be volatile whenever volumes are thin. Markets are always volatile. So, yeah. I think we're thankful to be here. We're thankful to have the opportunity. I think when you look at the space, the SAF space, where it is today, we are so early. We are just so early of what it looks like over the next 25-year horizon that we just want to be in the ecosystem. And we think that taking a bet on SAF, taking a bet on a pure play sustainable aviation fuel vehicle, we think that those are really the right positioning in this space early. So we're proud to be here, and now we've got to do our job.
Any good celebrations planned tonight? You going out having a good time?
There was a good amount of celebrating done over the weekend. So I think we're now like business as usual.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear. Well, honestly, thanks so much for jumping on. It's been a real treat. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got a busy and hectic schedule today, I'm sure. But it's been great to have you on, Mihir, to talk about XCF Global. Everyone should check it out now, trading under the symbol SAFX. And we will have their verified shareholder community up and running on pretty soon. So thanks again, Mihir, for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the community.